Welcome to the Anton Podcast, unraveling the intricacies of life one conversation at a time. So if this is your first time listening or watching, what's up? Hello, my name is Anton Fausto, and I believe that everybody has a unique and interesting story to tell that's worth sharing. I'm really just here enjoying the universe through different people, and I'm super excited for this conversation. My guest for today was my professor in philosophy. He loves to hike and he loves life, and I hope that he loved me as a student as well. He's also the man behind the Backstage Podcast on philosophy, aka DT. Welcome to the show, Mr. Dennis Temporal. Sir, how are you doing? Thank you very much for your time.
I'm good. Thank you, Anton, for having me in your podcast as a guest. I'm just glad to be reconnected with you after, I guess, 2 or 3 years since the last time I saw you on campus, which I'm sure both of us seriously miss.
Sir, before we start, how many years have you been teaching already, philosophy?
This is my 10th year. 10th year teaching philosophy in Ateneo. But I have to add 1 year where I taught philosophy in another college. So that would be 11 years teaching, focusing only on philosophy.
Sir, would you say that you learned more in your years teaching compared to your years studying? I'm not sure how does it work with, I would imagine like maybe a mathematics teacher would like whatever he knew after he graduated, unless he continued studying, it's the same. But then if you're philosophy, you can say, I feel like it's you can learn every single day.
Oh, sure. Yeah, definitely. That's the way it is really. Even in my own experience, it's the kind of field where the learning is continuous, and not to say that it's superior to other fields when it comes to learning more after the formal studies are done, but it's the kind of learning that happens in philosophy, or if you use philosophy as your way of learning, it's qualitatively different because it's all about the person's interaction with life. It's all about the ingredients are really all about life and the person's experiences. Yeah, so it's fairly limitless kind of learning, and hopefully, if the philosophizing is done correctly, then the learning is always a matter of going deeper into one's realizations and discoveries.
I think that was one of the main reasons why I really enjoyed philosophy. Actually, sir, I'm going to tell you a quick story. Because I was your student for 2 semesters. The first time we started having philosophy, the students have philosophy 3rd year, and usually you have to have the same professor in the 1st sem and 2nd sem.
Yes.
But what ended up happening, I was on my JTA sem, and parang it got kind of messed up. We all got like delisted from our classes, and then we all had to enlist. And they were just telling us, just enlist back in your regular class. I'm not gonna say the name of my professor, but I didn't really enjoy his/her class. And I knew, I heard of Sir Temporal, solid daw mag-tour ng philosophy. It's fun. So I kind of cheated my way into your class, and I remember our JTA Facebook groups were saying like, for those who enlisted in another professor, please please delist yourself and go back. And I'm thinking like, if they're gonna tell me that, if they're the ones saying, hey, you have to take yourself out, that means they don't have the power to do it. So I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna stay quiet. And if no one notices, at least I shot my shot. And I would have to say that I'm very thankful, because from the 2 semesters also that I was under you, I remember the 2nd semester, ang daming mga cancellation of classes. So I felt like it was the first sem where I really had the richest and fullest temporal experience.
Yeah. That was still the time. I'm feeling kind of sentimental right now, because that was still the time when the arrangement in the university, when students would take philosophy of the human person, their introduction to philosophy, back to back, 2 courses back to back within the same academic year. And I feel sentimental because that's no longer the case. I don't know if you've heard, but it's no longer the case.
So how's it now?
It started from last year's batch. Sophomores now get to go through their first philosophy course. But then it's they have a choice of which branch of philosophy to choose. It's no longer it's still called philosophy of the human person, but they get to take it only for one sem.
Mm-hmm.
The following sem, it's another topic in philosophy. So gone are the days of the setup when you would have only one philosophy class. You would only have one philosophy professor to philosophize with throughout the entire year. So it's a different setup now. Yeah, and I miss those times. I remember your class. It was one of my last classes that had a big size. I remember we had the big classroom, and the rows would go all the way to the going upward to the end of the classroom, the hall type of classroom. And I remember that semester, the second semester in particular, we had a lot of opportunities to we had a lot of cancellations. And at the same time, the kind of philosophy that we were doing allowed us to have a kind of sharing of thoughts and experiences in class. I don't know if you remember that you had to one major requirement of the course was for you to stand in front of the class and to philosophize on the spot on your own experience and to share that with the class, because we were doing phenomenology at that time. Yeah.
But sir, I remember it in that class though. I mean, I would say this till now, you're my favorite professor, but my gosh, I would really get anxiety before the class because you had a style, the graded recitation. So you're going to go into class and then you don't know who's going to be called. And
yes.
I would have to admit I wasn't the best student. Like when it comes to readings, like even if I was anxious a lot, like I would if I had the chance, I'd still go through it again. But it was tough. I have to say it was.
I remember you did well. I remember your both your oral exams, the final exams for both courses. I still have some impressions in my mind about it because you did well.
Thank you.
The tool that you used for philosophizing back then was not so much analytical skills, but it was more of the creative skills.
I didn't know
you were like some students. They're able to look at the same topic or the same question and then to bring together different ideas and then create new ideas from that. Some students are excellent when it comes to breaking down a philosophical problem and then explaining exactly how they come together. But some students are creative when it comes to their insights. And I remember, especially your second semester, we had the oral exam, and I congratulated you because it was so significantly different from the first semester. So there was a clear
improvement. Know this.
And that's what I miss from the old setup.
Back then, progression.
Back then, I could really see how the courses would positively affect a student because you can see it from the performance. That's no longer the case these days.
Yeah,
especially with the pandemic, because the last lecture that I had, and I'm glad that you referred to the way I would handle the live or in-person class with the recitation and the dialogue and the engagement with the student. We can no longer do that these days because especially the last lecture that I had was sometime in March at the start of before the lockdown started. So these days all of us are going online, and you don't really get to lecture. Most of the time, the students take their courses. We call it asynchronously. They go through the work, the projects online, and then we meet up once or twice a week just to discuss some things. But it's not like before that. The meeting in the classroom was an event in itself.
Yeah.
These days, it's no longer that. It's basically the student
Oh,
reading, watching videos, and having written outputs on their own, and then they
yeah.
meet up with their class or their professors. So it's really something different. So I'm glad that you referred back to those years,
Yeah. I'd have to
because
say my year, I mean the I was born 1996. I think we were one of the last I'd have to say we were one of the last generations or like batch of people who were born when the world was still kind of normal, because I feel like now with all the technology and then now there's a pandemic, like I got to experience whatever school was like for
mm,
everybody else who's older than me. I would
yeah,
say this also, like Ateneo High School has girls now. Their PE uniform
yeah,
changed. I feel like I got to experience all
yeah,
the good stuff on the past
yeah.
generation.
You're definitely I definitely agree with you on that, because it's I suppose for people in your generation, you still had a sense of what the world or at least society used to be,
Yeah,
what it was like without the disruptions.
yeah,
Um, sometime maybe from 10 years ago, the disruptions just kept on
yeah,
coming in. Of course, it first started with disruptions caused by technology, which would often be something that we welcome, even though they are disruptive.
yeah.
And then disruptions caused by climate change, which we're now observing. So, well, for instance, as you and I record this podcast,
Yeah.
it's
Virtual.
Manila is getting hit by, and so many other
Oh, that's right.
areas of the Philippines getting hit by yet another super typhoon. So another disruption, and then of course this gigantic disruption we call COVID-19.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, your generation still has that kind of connection to the old world,
Yeah,
so to
thank
speak.
God. But with the new stuff in this pandemic, I mean, it really sucks. And I'm not gonna try to sugarcoat it and say like, oh, we should find the good in it. But well, also me starting a podcast, and also you started a podcast recently. But my podcast is really interview, so it's really about connecting with other people. For example, I know you're very busy. It would have been harder to set this up, and to contact you and to have this call and everything. There. I would like to believe that there have been some positive things. Like it forced humans to be like, okay, we have no choice but to be able to work with people in remote
Mm.
areas. Just the last thing I
Yeah.
want to ask about the teaching for you. Is there one thing that pops up as a benefit, or because of the setup that we're forced in this pandemic, you realize or learn, oh, I could improve in doing this certain thing in this way pala.
Yeah. What I've been noticing, and this is something that I'm sure my colleagues in Ateneo would also uh, would would somehow be observing along with me. We're noticing that there's really good engagement from the students through online learning. It happens
Really?
when they, in response to the learning materials we provide online using the system that Ateneo has taken for itself for online education. We post learning materials, right? And the way the students engage in these materials, you can see that there's really involvement. They post their
Mm-hmm.
replies. They want to be. A number of my students want to make sure that they get to post something in response to a reading or a
Okay.
video, and they really want to be sure that they make the deadline. Something that we could not expect in the old normal, because most of the learning should happen in the classroom.
Yeah.
I'm kind of glad about the level of student engagement now.
Now, sir, I want to jump into your podcast. So the first episode you had in the Backstage Podcast was about wisdom and happiness. You mentioned also about how there are people who are addicted to happiness. I personally I would have to say I'm one of those. I really thought growing up, I really believed that life is meant to live happily. When I was a kid pa lang, I kind of just thought to myself like, I think this is how life is supposed to be. I'm
Mm,
supposed to look for happiness, because like at the end of the day, you know what? When we all die, we're gonna be forgotten in the future and anything. Might as well just be happy. But
Mm.
you brought up an interesting point, which you also said that might cause some people to disagree with you. I want to be. It was a 12-minute episode. Honestly, ako nabitin ako, so I kind of want to dive into that a little more. You talked about how happiness isn't the goal; it's wisdom.
Yeah.
Get it right
Yes.
in
Yes.
being
Yes.
wise, even if happiness doesn't follow. So, could you expound a little more on that? I feel like I'm being brought back to my
Yeah. Yeah.
days as a student.
Fantastic. I'm just glad that you got to listen to it, and then I'm assured that at least somebody has listened to it. The context of that episode, wisdom is the better goal
Yeah.
rather than happiness, is a debate that is old or ancient in philosophy. What is the real purpose of human actions aside from the biological actions that we have of eating, walking, breathing? These are all actions, but we're talking about certain actions that come from our freedom, our ability to relate with one another, our certain actions that we we perform, but we could actually at the same time say, I don't need to do this. So these are actions that come from freedom. The question was, when it comes to these actions that come from human freedom, what are they for? What are they trying to achieve? And the two candidates that came out would be happiness, which was so intuitive to people, but at the same time there was the suggestion that maybe it's wisdom. We find this tradition, especially historically, about 300 or 500 years before the Christian era, when certain regions in the world started to develop a kind of thinking that suggested that perhaps it's not happiness, it's not even pleasure that is the goal of human actions of the type that I was talking about earlier, actions of freedom, actions of relating with one another, actions that are proper to human beings, rather than actions that we share with other animals, like feeding, reproduction. We're looking at specific human actions, and the suggestion was perhaps it's not pleasure or happiness that we are really looking for, but we are looking for something deeper. A simple action of making a new friend, which of course is an ancient practice among human
Yeah.
beings. Otherwise, we would not have formed groups,
Relationships and everything.
societies, and relationships. Right, a topic that Socrates and Plato really thought seriously about, the question of friendship. If you ask yourself, what is the whole point of that action? Is it to make us happy, or is it to find something deeper about the experience of friendship? And their idea was, maybe what we are really looking for is not happiness. Happiness is the illusion or the first goal,
Okay.
but the goal behind that,
It's
especially
wisdom.
once happiness has been achieved, is meaningfulness. And that's historically, that's the time when the great religion started to come out. Even in Eastern philosophy, Buddhism came out, and it was the whole idea that perhaps because we are always challenged by nature to survive, like now in the
Mhm.
pandemic, right? There is an opportunity for us to reassess the real purpose of human action. The answer was, maybe it's not happiness, maybe it's wisdom. So in the episode that you referred to, I wanted to propose that wisdom is the higher objective.
Okay.
I think I stayed away from suggesting that wisdom is the only objective. I think I suggested that wisdom is the higher objective. In fact, happiness is very natural for many people.
Yeah.
But if you give reflection to it, you will realize that the reason people seek happiness is because they want something deeper. A basic example here is, if somebody tells you, you know what, I want to buy myself this new laptop for Christmas, for instance, and I really feel that when I get that laptop, it's going to help me feel happy, right? So very basic example of somebody wanting something in order to be happy. Look at the progression of the desire. It begins with wanting something, a concrete thing, and if you ask the person, but why do you want this? The person will
value
respond,
does it give you?
yeah, why do you want this? What's the purpose of wanting this? Even if you try it out in a practical way, asking a person, why would you want to achieve this? Whatever it is, right? It could be an object, or it could be an experience. I want to go bungee jumping, or in my case, you mentioned that I was somebody who was into hiking.
Yeah.
Why would I want to climb to the top of Mount Everest? And a realistic and expected answer is that because I want to be happy. I want the thrill of it, and so many other ways of describing the same thing, right? But if you push some more, especially to ask philosophically, but why would you want to be happy? Why do you want happiness? Then the human mind or the spirit begins to ask the deeper question. That's right. Why do I want the feeling of happiness, knowing that it's so transitory anyway from our experience of past happiness? We do know that it does not stay. We do know, in fact, that even though many psychologists or neurologists will probably disagree with the equating happiness with the emotion of it, the consciousness of happiness, that I'm aware that I'm happy, might not be easily equated with the emotion of it. It's a big debate. But for in daily living, we do know that happiness is a feeling, an emotion, and because it's often understood as an emotion, we also must recognize that it's fleeting. It never stays. So when you ask a person, but why do you want to be happy? Then the mind is pushed to consider other possibilities. One possibility is the person will tell you, I want to be happy, so I could have a point in life. Then you begin to see that, hey, there are other goals beyond happiness. And then you can call it also, you want meaningfulness in life. Yeah, I want to have a meaningful life, and I feel that if I'm happy, then I will have a meaningful life. And you see the logic now. It's meaningfulness that the person wants. If the person is somewhat religious, and especially the ancient answer was, but why do you want to pursue happiness? The ancient answer, which actually started this debate, would be, well, the greatest happiness is for me to be with God, or to be in heaven. And then the question goes, but why do you want to be in heaven, since happiness is heaven to you? Well, I just want to be with God. So it's not happiness that is the final goal. It's a higher one. And I suspect that in actual experience, it's not so much happiness, but happiness is a means to achieve something higher. And my favorite philosopher, Immanuel Kant, has argued that that something could be an experience of goodness in one's existence, to experience the fullness of the goodness of nature, the goodness of God. And other philosophers would have the same thinking. They share in the idea that happiness is only an instrument. That's why even Plato described it as a kind of an illusion. And many religious leaders from that age in human history would say that that's only the illusion. Happiness, including its cousin, pleasure, because what you're really looking for is something greater than happiness.
Yeah.
And happiness is only an instrument. Very natural for human beings. It's something that we are entitled to, I suppose, because we are capable of being happy. And it's just wonderful to be happy. But if we ask ourselves what's behind happiness, then we would find something else. Wisdom is one of them. Wisdom is a candidate that I'm.
But you're saying it's not the only one. It's not the only higher level. There are other things also out there.
It's not the only higher level. Yeah. Some people might say it's meaningfulness. Some people might say, well, it's union with God. It's oneness with God. Some people would say peace. Wisdom for me is not just being knowledgeable, or it's not something about understanding. My appreciation of wisdom is kind of ancient. It's the one that the way I explain this to people is, Have you ever wondered why in the Christian Bible, or even in the Bible of the Jewish religion, there is a book of wisdom?
Mm-hmm.
There is an entire collection of wisdom sayings. The
Yeah.
book of wisdom, together with the book of Proverbs, the book of Psalms,
Yeah. Tweetable tweets.
a
Yun
different type.
yung,
Yeah, the different type of writing. And if you look at how, for example, a lot of people even today are so inspired by wise words.
mm-hmm.
And if you go behind the language, you ask yourself, but why was it that I was so consoled by the wise words of somebody? And then you will be hitting at something that we call wisdom. The ancient philosophers even thought that wisdom, they personified it. They made it they made a metaphor. It was like a human being, like love. The ancient Greeks even personified it in the person of the goddess Athena, the goddess of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't just intelligence; it was a kind of experience. I have a feeling that my understanding of wisdom will be similar, or at least related to, what the Buddhists will say when they strive for enlightenment. That kind of discovery that I myself, I've never experienced it, but I've read about it and I've thought about it, and I've heard people say that they have reached enlightenment one way or another. Even in my religious tradition of Catholicism, there have been stories of great men and women of saintliness and great devotion to God, who have reached a kind of state of mind and experience that can only be described by the word enlightenment. But in my thinking, maybe they have achieved wisdom. So I don't define wisdom as knowledge,
Yeah.
or being smart. And the thing is, in my reflections on that, a surprise comes along. When you seek wisdom first, when you seek clear understanding of things, surprisingly, happiness follows. And even if happiness does not follow, the world or nature itself or existence itself is not promising happiness to us. All it takes is a typhoon to suddenly make us run about just like our human ancestors. We run about like cockroaches, and we are threatened like cockroaches. A virus comes out and suddenly our happiness disappears. There is no assurance to happiness. In fact, some philosophers even argue that happiness is an impossible goal, and psychologists now are confirming it. Happiness has this tendency of making you want the next thing. They call it psychologists call it psychologists call it the hedonistic treadmill.
Okay.
Hedonism, not to say that it's a bad thing, but hedonism is a way of describing the human desire for happiness. That's why we say a hedonist is somebody who desires pleasure, but it's actually not pleasure. It's happiness that the person wants. So it's a fairly natural and neutral thing to desire happiness. But notice, with happiness, you get to achieve the thing that you want, and it makes you happy for a few seconds, for a few minutes, and then you want the next thing, or you want to sustain it. Consider a fantastic movie that you've been waiting for, and then you finally saw it. And during the screening, you're actually feeling the thrill of happiness because something is being satisfied in you, even visually. And then I want to ask people who do say, that movie made me so happy, that movie made me so alive and so thrilled. I ask the person, but how long will that stay? And when that is over, do you not look for the next best movie to give you the same thrill? The same, I've observed the same phenomenon in other human activities. The phrase I would like to use is that it really perplexes me how somebody could already claim to have climbed the highest summit in the world, and after that would still want more.
Yeah.
And after climbing it 3 times or 5 times, the thrill is over. The next goal is to climb it without wearing any oxygen tank. Or the next goal is to climb it in combination with the other 6 summits.
But sir, I want to make it clear. Like, it's not a bad thing, right? It's not a bad thing that we have this human nature to never be satisfied and always want more. Because I know that the reason why there's progress is that because people don't settle. We wanted more. We want to communicate better, so we have telephones. We want to better cell phones, and it just keeps developing and developing. But then I acknowledge that we can get lost when you were talking about searching for happiness. I'm really one of those. After a good hangout or a party and then it's done, I'm gonna look forward to the next one. Do you have any advice on how maybe I could have like a mindset change or shift to still that it won't be like a drug? Because I have to admit, especially now in this pandemic, every rare opportunity I have to see another living person outside of my family, I really treasure it. And then after that, I really crave for the next one. I end up being in this cycle. I guess it's kind of like a drug that you just want the next one. And when you're done with it, you want the next one. What can you advise for someone like me that's sort of like lost in that cycle of just going for the next one and the next one?
First, I want to commend you for not only for asking that question, but I can sense that there's a real drive to find out an answer. I had to tell you that because the more I inquire about wisdom as a philosopher, I would have to say that that's already a manifestation of a person's desire for something, to know something deeper, to experience something deeper than happiness. Just the fact that you asked it. I'll rely not on philosophy anymore for this one, but I'll rely on spirituality, which is a cousin, very much related to philosophy. And I'll borrow from somebody that I'm sure you're familiar with, Saint Ignatius of Loyola.
Yeah, of course.
Not many people know that the real expertise of Ignatius of Loyola is this idea: our real task in this world, when we exist, is to order things. So my tip is, go ahead and pursue happiness, because, as you've said, it's very natural. Plus, the effect that it gives us is undeniable. It is so natural. Either you feel the happiness, you feel the thrill, you feel the reward of the experience or the moment. Ignatius of Loyola challenges anyone to order things, to put things in proper order. So the proper order, I think, or in my experience, is to put the pursuit of happiness as the first step, but to always ask oneself, but why do I want this? Why do I want to be happy? And then you will see that it will somehow branch out.
Yeah.
For example, in applying this to myself, without going into the details, knowing my own history and looking back now from where I am at this point in my life, I do see that there was a clear moment when I moved away from asking myself, okay, what will make me happy? And there was a clear shift to, okay, what will make me feel meaningful? What will give me a kind of meaningfulness in my life?
And did you feel did you feel happier with that? I want to know, like okay, fast forward, because I haven't reached that. I'm thinking maybe because I do want to live a happier life, and if I could, I don't know if it's a trick that if I trick myself into, instead of looking for what activity or event's gonna make me happy, what if I look for one that's gonna give me meaning and it's gonna find me wisdom? Will I be happier then? So in your experience, sir, could you say that you lived a happier life ever since you started doing that?
Surprisingly, with a reordering of things, with a shifting of priority, the effect is not only the same as finding happiness, but it's sustained.
That's what I need.
Here's an example.
I need that long term.
It's sustained.
I want the long term happiness.
Yeah. So I suppose. Well, here's another tip. It's not to get into the trap or the illusion, as many philosophers call it. Not to get into the illusion or hooked into the illusion that it's happiness that is the be all and end all.
Yeah.
Because if that's the case, then you will really. There's a play that I once upon a time directed in Ateneo.
Oh.
And it's about this guy. The title of the musical is Pippin. It's about a guy who was basically looking for a place in the world. But if you watch the play closely, you would see that he's just being like everyone else. We're looking for happiness. Until the end, he realizes that the way to happiness is to not even look for it, but to look for the more important things in life. And in the case of that musical, he first gave attention to a relationship because it also had a love story. He first gave attention and priority to the relationship that was in front of him. And then happiness followed. This is also the experience of many people. For example, a person who, in concrete terms, a person who gives up on the idea of the way for me to be happy is to date. Until that person realizes that here you have in front of you is a person who, as we say, is a keeper. Somebody that could be the one that you can commit yourself to. Notice that at that precise moment, there will be a shift in priority. The person will no longer ask himself, but will this person make me happy? That person will now ask, is this the person that I want to live my life with? Is this a person I want to commit myself to? Mm-hmm. And what is now the person looking for? The person is no longer looking for happiness, which has already been experienced. The person is looking for relationship, meaningfulness.
And in that sense, it's like
I haven't said it yet. I haven't. Happiness therefore, I wanted to stay away from using that word. It sounds so academic. But I have no other word. Therefore, happiness is an effect rather than the goal. Ooh. Yeah, to put it in full terms, if you're dealing with a marathon runner, right? Don't tell the marathon runner that the goal, Miss Marathon Runner or Mr. Marathon Runner, you know what? The whole point of you running a marathon is for you to feel the joy and to cry at the end out of triumph. The goal is to cross the line, to cross the 43rd kilometer or 42nd kilometer.
Everything just follows.
I think, yeah. Everything follows. But if you don't cross, then nothing follows. even if you promise the runner, look, you tell the runner, look, I promise you, the minute you cross the 42nd kilometer, when you make it to the finish line after running for so many hours, you will be so happy. You will have tears of joy. I promise you that. But then the runner doesn't cross the finish line at all. Doesn't finish. So goodbye, goal of happiness. That's why I use the word reordering. Notice with reordering, when you reorder things, you don't destroy anything.
Yeah, you're not sacrificing.
Which brings me to the point that you brought up earlier, that happiness is natural. Happiness is a good thing, in fact.
Yeah.
That's why it was a debate whether happiness is the goal or something else. And my suggestion is to reorder, to make your objective something else which you believe and a lot of people have confirmed to be higher than happiness. With the assurance of many people, and even with psychology now. The psychology of happiness is being studied. Even these brilliant minds in psychology will tell you that happiness is not the goal. The human being looks for something else first, which is higher than happiness, and happiness is the effect. And the good thing is, even if happiness does not follow, for example, in acts of sacrifice, right? Okay. When somebody makes a sacrifice, there's a higher goal. I don't have a right term for it. Maybe love for another person or love for a country. Like Jose Rizal was not, I'm sure Jose Rizal was not happy when he was gunned down.
Yeah.
Happiness could not be the result of his sacrificial action. And he knew it. Yet he still did it, even though he knew that it would not make him happy. My point is, even let us say that in your pursuit of this higher thing, whatever that is, I'll give it a name later on from the Christian tradition, right? Whatever that X thing, the promise is that if it is followed by happiness, it will really make you happy. But if in case happiness does not follow, you will still do it. You will still pursue it. Perhaps there is a better candidate. Now I'm no longer just thinking as a philosopher. And thanks to our discussion, Anton, there is a possible higher candidate. But we must go to the Christian tradition rather than the tradition of philosophy. The Christian tradition proposes that it is love. Saint Paul or Saul it was his previous name.
Yeah.
Paul realized that in his pursuit of knowledge, he wanted knowledge, not happiness. He wanted knowledge above all. Then he realized there was a higher goal. One of the best lines in the New Testament was something like, "When I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I so on and so forth. I walked like a child. But now that I'm no longer a child, I see things differently." Just to paraphrase it, I think he was talking about love. And then somewhere else in his letters, he said, "The greatest of these, faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love." And then finally, he makes the equation, which I think I used in the class I conducted for you and your classmates. He made the radical equation, Deus es caritas, God is love. The whole idea was, in their time, if God was your greatest goal in life, especially among the early Christians, Paul was radical enough to say, so you're looking for love as a replacement or a substitute to happiness. He could very well be correct that behind our pursuit of happiness is really something else. We are really looking not for an experience of happiness, but for an experience of love. Wherever that may be found, most of the time, especially in the modern world, we do find that in relationships. But we can't deny that we do find it in so many other things where we dedicate ourselves to.
Okay.
Like people who have dedicated themselves to a kind of advocacy, or people have dedicated, like your folks, for example, who have dedicated themselves to raising a family. I assure you, as a dad, there is nothing joyful about paying for your child's tuition fee.
That's right.
Especially the time of the pandemic. You don't. It's crazy. It's so unrealistic for you to say, the minute I released that check in these challenging times, I was jumping for joy. No, yeah. I released that check because I want my son or my daughter to have a good education. Sir or ma'am, why do you want that? Because I love that person. So it's loving that person that is the goal.
So there's the
not the happiness.
You're looking for something else, and happiness would be like an after effect. Because in my experience also, especially now in the pandemic, I'm someone who loves to go out. I kind of have like a 48-hour timer. I know I should be grateful, and I'm grateful that I have a nice house, of safe here. We have food. My family's here. But if I'm just home for 48 hours, I get too cooked up, and then I get annoyed, and then I feel like my happiness kind of goes down. Why I'm bringing this up is because I realized that, again, like what I talked about earlier, when I was a kid, I felt like my default was happy. Like, I'm happy in the day unless something bad happens. It's reached a point now, I don't know if this is just part of growing up, that my default, I feel like, isn't happiness anymore, but I think it should be. Like now, if I'm in a state of, idleness, I feel like that's when I feel like my anxiety increases. I feel like it's not, parang there's no balance if I'm idle compared to if I fill my day with tasks and things to do. Oh, I should do this, ganyan. I'll go out, I'll meet with this person, all these things. That's when I feel like I'm happier. But now I'm questioning, is the happiness that I would feel in those tasks, are they just distractions? Because when I'm not doing anything, when I'm idle, how come that's when I feel like I'm unhappiest? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, again, that is so natural. Anyone who's listening to this has to understand that the pursuit of happiness is not only so natural, we are also entitled to it. We have a right to happiness. What is being suggested tonight in this podcast is a reordering. With what you just said, reordering means also to give experiences their proper names. What do I mean? Sometimes when people are pursuing another thing aside from happiness, they seem to think that the result is happiness. For example, I'm pursuing, the dream of providing a good education to my daughter. I do imagine that someday when that obligation and that duty is done, and my daughter has received the full education and everything else, I do imagine that I will be happy, right? But I would be fooling myself if at that time I call it happiness. I probably should call it by a different term. You see, the feeling is the same, but the source is different.
And where
So
you turn
part
your
of the
attention to.
yeah, part of the reordering, or perhaps the better term that some of your listeners might be familiar with, would be part of the reprogramming of the mind.
Okay.
Is to give the experience a different name because it is really a different experience. I don't expect myself, for example, once a dream of mine is to see my daughter go up like you did, go up the stage and to receive
Graduate.
the final confirmation that she has completed her education, right? Called the graduation night, the graduation ceremony. I don't expect myself to be jumping about and telling myself that is happiness. I'll probably tell myself that that is fulfillment, that is meaningfulness. And this is part of the reordering, to be able to give the proper name, proper labels to things so that we can distinguish them. Otherwise, kung lahat na lang ay happiness, malilito talaga ako. Kung lahat na lang ng epekto na mararamdaman ko ay happiness ang tawag ko. Pagkain ko ng paborito kong pagkain, happiness na yon. Pati yung pagkain ko ng pag-inom ko ng pinaka-paborito kong inumin, happiness na rin yon. Pwede akong malito. Kasi pag na-experience ko yung happiness mula sa ibang tao, mula sa pagmamahal ng isang tao, tatawagin ko rin happiness yon. May problema na tayo. We are now equivocating, making things that are not the same to be the same.
Yeah.
So in English, it is important for us to be able to distinguish the experience of happiness from the experience of other things, and not to call other good experiences as happiness. For example, no, the experience of love. The experience of love surely can be described as I'm being happy, but there's more to it.
There's more
than just being happy, right? And sometimes we don't have the words for it. That's why poets to this very day never cease to never make their pen stop because of their pursuit of the ability to describe exactly what that is that we're experiencing.
Yeah.
In other words, Anton, there's more to happiness than just making happiness the goal. The next time you desire something that you believe will make you happy, that's fine. But ask yourself, why am I doing this? What else am I looking for? And if the answer happens to be, hey, it's not really happiness that you're looking for, it's not the thrill that you're looking for, what you're really looking for is perhaps time with people, companionship with people, time with significant others in your life. Then it's part of the ordering challenge to make your consciousness say that I'm aware that it's not really happiness that I'm looking for. I'm aware that it's something else. And there's something wonderful that happens when the mind begins to sift through and begin to see things in their proper order. Yeah. There's just a kind of effect that is lasting, and the work of many counselors is basically the same thing. It's basically to put our pursuits in their proper order.
Yeah. Do you have a thought process when it comes to this? Because I'm seeing it now, and I'm gonna really be doing my best to like apply this. For example, when I would take math classes, I enjoyed math because, okay, we're given this complex problem, but we have these formulas. And if you see this, okay, you do this, step 1, step 2, step 3, and then you're going to get to solve the problem. How I wish that it could be like that with life, that we're given these set of instructions. When you see a problem that's kind of like this, you use this formula. If you see this other type, it's another kind of formula. But when it comes to that in happiness, because I do want to have a happier life, and I do want to, like, if there's something more that's better, and you know, because I do feel the emptiness a bit of just, okay, it was happy for a while, tapos nawala na. Do you have a thought process that goes beyond just questioning first, okay, why do I want this? Is it, what beyond happiness is it that I'm looking for? Do you have any like steps or practices that you practice yourself also when it comes to these situations?
Yeah. To share it with you and to explain it to you, I'll first use something, an analogy that I'm very familiar with because I use it in class, right? The whole idea is there's a big difference if you tell yourself, you're looking at the ingredients to bake chocolate cake. Mm-hmm. There's a big difference if you tell yourself, why do I want to bother and bake chocolate cake myself when I could buy it from a store, from a bake shop. Why do I bother? It's a big difference if you say, I want the hassle of baking cake because I believe that baking cake will make me happy. Right? Okay. That's the false sense of happiness I'm talking about. Okay. Because the minute you're done baking cake, it's over. In a few seconds, the thrill will disappear. But if you tell yourself, hey, I'm going to bake cake, even if it doesn't make me happy, even if it's such a hassle, because I'm going to share the cake with my family later on. And when they enjoy it, then it will make me happy. Notice the real goal is to bake the cake for the family. Even if you look at it logically, your real goal then is to bake the cake so you can share it with the family. And then the expected effect is happiness.
Happy. Okay.
Almost to see happiness as a kind of a reward for the self. Mm-hmm. And to be realistic that in case happiness does not follow, you have a fallback and you ask yourself, but was I able to achieve my real goal to begin with, which was to bake cake for my family? Here's another one that will probably resonate with a lot of your listeners, especially with you, because I know that you're an artist. There's a big difference between an artist, right? And I'm drawing from my own experience of art through the theater from years ago.
Yeah.
I remember, and I know that this one, I know you can relate with this. Do you remember the time? Bigla ako na-excite. I suddenly felt excited. To the listeners, you should see me smiling right now, because I know this guy, Anton, has fantastic talent in a specific kind of art form. It's called dance, right? And it's a high-level kind of art form. You should see him in his YouTube videos together with Company of Dancers, Ateneo Dancers, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Company of Ateneo Dancers is the name of the group. That I've had several students from that Ateneo org. We call it org in Ateneo, and it's just a fantastic group to be with. They remind me of the way I did theater before, and this is the question.
You were part of Cebol, right, sir?
Dulang Cebol for high school.
Okay. There you go.
And I guess I had the first inkling of this idea that I'm sharing with you back then. And then I did musical theater in Ateneo with Blue Repertory. Consider the question. Isn't it that back then, you and I did our art not to be even praised by people which we feel will make us happy, not even to be acknowledged by people, but because the art simply called us, to make it sound romantic.
Just because.
It just pulled you. Or you just found yourself one morning dancing. In my case, I just found myself one morning loving declamation and loving words, reciting words without anyone listening to me. And it's that kind of childlike fascination for art. Compare that to somebody, especially to among us who have become too adult when it comes to our love of our art. When we will do something, we will perform our art only because we get monetized or we get paid for it. There's a big difference, between these two artists. And I'm not willing to say which one is superior to if one is superior to the other. All I'm saying is, for artists, you would understand what I'm saying. There is a big difference between doing something out of the love for it, art for art's sake, and doing something because it's going to give you happiness or it's going to give you prestige. Like a child just performing a newly discovered art. The child discovers that he can draw, that the lines are steady, and the hand does not shake when it's making curves, and the child will just do it without being asked, without even saying, I'm doing this because I feel happy. The child has no basis yet. Remember the first time, if you could remember the first time you danced, you have no basis, you have no knowledge that dancing would make you happy. Still, you did it. Mm-hmm. The same with me when I first discovered the joy of theater by joining a dramatics organization in high school. I had no idea it would make me happy. How could I? I had no experience. I had no prior experience. But still, I did it. Sure, what made me stay was happiness. But that's a different question. That's a different thing. I borrow from philosophy. When we pursue beauty, for instance, for its own sake, even if we know that it will not make us happy. Even if the artist is pursuing a project, wanting to create something on canvas, and in all honesty, the artist couldn't care less if it makes her or him thrilled afterwards,
or a lot of money.
In fact, he knows probably that. Yeah, in fact, the artist, you can imagine that this artist probably knows already that ridicule will happen afterwards. But still, the artist looks at the canvas and just gives birth to the art form. Then when you interview the artist later on, why did you do it? Knowing that it would not make you happy. They'll just say something higher. Something higher called me. The ancient Greeks called it the muses, right? They personified it. The muses called me, or the siren called me, and I couldn't say no to it.
I haven't heard
in
that
religion, the siren song, right?
Okay.
Usually it's depicted in Greek mythology. It's depicted like a terrible thing. That's why Odysseus had to tie himself up to a board in his ship and to tell his men, "Don't let me go."
He just wanted
because
to hear,
the siren song was drawing him, right?
Song. Yeah.
He just wanted to hear the song. Usually the interpretation is it's such a bad thing. But if you look at human life, there are things that call us. And I am willing I am proposing that one such thing, aside from love or wisdom, is art. The experience of beauty, the experience of truth in performance, for example. Yeah.
That makes sense. I feel like it sort of explains now, just answering my own questions from a while ago. I think it explains how, because when I started dancing when I was in grade school. That was more than 10 years ago. I danced because I want to dance. And then I joined orgs, and there's work involved, and then there's competition. You want to beat the next person. It's sort of
the
got
happiness
lost.
part.
And now I still get to dance. I'm a dance fitness instructor, but the goal there is to provide an avenue for people to work out, to exercise, make sure they're doing the proper form and anything, which is good, but it's not anymore as, to the core of why I started dancing in the first place. So I think that could kind of explain why maybe that's the thing that's missing in my life, because when I was that quote unquote happy by default person, I was dancing a lot. So maybe it's these certain activities.
And again, the message is there is no need to destroy anything. There is no need to discard anything. Happiness remains to be an after effect of a higher goal. And there is always the possibility, even the promise for certain activities, for example, there is the promise that, if you want to get thrilled, you will really get thrilled. For example, a simple example of wanting to go bungee jumping. For sure, all the endorphins and the serotonins or whatever neurochemicals, they will get triggered in you and you will feel happiness. There is that assurance. But perhaps there is a higher goal. I was struck by what you said when you referred to your own experience as a child discovering the power and beauty of dance. There are studies in psychology now, and there's even a book written on this, what I'm going to say. I just can't recall the author, but it goes something like this. When a child performs something really wonderful or great, don't reward the child with material things, not even with too many words. Just let the child experience the joy of doing that thing. It is actually counterproductive, so says this author in these studies. It is actually counterproductive to associate the raw joy of the child who has just learned how to dance or how to paint or how to play an instrument by rewarding it with what the world rewards you with, like money or applause. Because then, what I was saying earlier, the programming shifts. The mind begins to latch on to what is so powerful, which is the emotion of being applauded, the emotion of being rewarded. And that's when the trap happens very early in our childhood. The minute we were doing something so natural that we discovered ourselves almost by intuition, and we call it art, our art form. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly the adults come in, and either they will do one of two things. Either they will discourage you from doing that kasi walang pera doon. They will tell you, don't do that because you won't get rich that way. So goodbye. Goodbye the experience of it. Or they will tell you, wow, you're going to be famous someday. Just keep on doing this. Exactly what happened with the favorite artist of many people, Michael Jackson, for example. pure talent, right? When he discovered singing,
Yeah.
totally untutored, nobody taught him how to hit those high notes, and then just the commercialism just stepped in.
Yeah.
The way to do this is, especially we want to be practical, is to ask ourselves, can I make my art provide income for me, provide rewards for me, but can I stay integrated? Can I stay honest with my art by saying, you know what, even if you don't pay me, I will still do this
That makes sense.
because it's my love. It gives me something more than what happiness follows from. So let the world reward you, but don't get trapped into the illusion
Yes.
that you're doing this for the world, that you're doing this for the audience, that you're doing this for the applause, or that you're doing this to keep a reputation. Because what brought you to that point in the first place was not that. And that's I think the illusion that a lot of philosophers are warning or have warned people about.
Yeah. To like put it in a more current way of people would say this. They say don't get lost in the sauce. I think that's exactly
There you
it.
go.
And I do okay, so it's two things, because usually I would always like advise against it when people look for the job. Like if I don't like this job, it's like, no, that's not for me, because if you find a job that you love, you'll never work a day. I also always believe, because I always never really believed in that, because you can't, it's never gonna be always good, especially in your career. So it's also, you have to, one, look for the job that's sort of gonna kind of be easiest for you to feel like, oh, I'm not working in a day. But at the same time, we have the responsibility to make sure that you stick to your why. Why do you like doing it? And and not do it for the money, not do it for the fame and all the accolades and everything.
Again, I return to the task or the challenge of ordering things. Consider happiness to be a legitimate and a high objective. A lot of people want it, and it does give us a thrill, not to delude ourselves into thinking that that's it, that you're performing this action, or you're pursuing, you're dedicating yourself to this work because it's for happiness. There must be something higher. And I invite people, and I challenge even my students to go higher, because there could be something else that you're looking for, higher than happiness. And certainly, as, at least I hope that it came through this in this podcast. Certainly, there are higher things than happiness. I mean, and that's something I'm willing to get into a conversation with anyone.
Yeah, and I think that would be the more long-term one. Like you would feel the effects more if you get to find those more meaningful. Now, you also mentioned this in your podcast, happiness and wisdom. People who are addicted to happiness only, they just want to feel the happiness, would sacrifice being wise so that they can attain that happiness here in the pandemic. And now I'm someone who really believes in carpe diem. You have to prioritize your happiness, work-life balance. There's always supposed to be a balance. How do you find the balance, and how do you still take care of your own happiness during a pandemic?
Yeah. In the context of the pandemic, I like your question because it really puts a kind of a historical stamp on this podcast. Many years from now, if you're listening to this podcast,
this is 2020.
The context, ladies and gentlemen, is the great pandemic of 2020, and it's not yet over. In Europe has just declared practically an entire continent in lockdown. The United States is trembling from the effects of the virus. Here in the Philippines, we are somewhat glad that things have leveled down one way or another. But in the context of the pandemic, I think it would be the great illusion to say that it's still happiness as a goal, because this is a crisis moment. Even in our individual lives, when there is a crisis moment, you would be a fool to say that the goal is still happiness. You would be in absolute denial of the reality that's in front of you. I think that in such a crisis moment, as serious and as grave and as life-threatening as COVID-19, I think that the goal is survival, which has been the goal of human beings from prehistory. When we made survival our goal because it was called for rather than happiness, we did survive. And I think it will be false. look at the behavior of so many people now. I won't mention any society or any community in the world right now, but the news media is just so filled with accounts and reports of how certain communities in the world are still in denial about the serious effects of the virus.
Mm-hmm.
They still want to prioritize going to bars and enjoying their old normal lifestyle, like enjoying restaurants without restrictions, going to places without restrictions. But that's no longer the reality. At least for the time being and for the foreseeable future, maybe the next 1 year or 2 years, humanity is in crisis mode. One way to describe people who are still insisting that our old behaviors, which is the pursuit of happiness, will still be our way out of the pandemic, I think that would be a great disservice to our, not only our intelligence, but the human spirit. There are other things that human beings can pursue, beginning with survival. The survival of one's family, to begin with, because we are now, the pandemic is basically attacking households, families. And the whole idea is it's the preservation not only of the self, but the family as a unit. And if you make it larger, I think the task for humanity right now is not the pursuit of happiness. Maybe we can have that some other time. The task of humanity right now is survival, Anton. And because this COVID-19 is no joke. If left unchecked, it has the capacity to basically wipe out a huge percentage of humanity. We're looking at nature at work in this sense. Immanuel Kant argued that one reason why happiness is not the goal for us is because nature does not favor us.
Yeah,
It's totally romantic for anyone to say, or religious or spiritual, too spiritual for me, for anyone to say that, we are the favorite entities of nature. That's not the truth. The fact is the seasons will change from winter to spring, and then spring makes a promise, and then it's fall and winter all over again. The way they have been doing the same actions for thousands and millions of years. And then human beings find ourselves in this world. And in today's world, we're looking at a virus. And viruses have been on Earth for millions of years.
Yeah.
If survival is not our goal right now, survival of communities, survival of entire nations, I suppose there won't be a human being, or the individual won't even be there to pursue happiness.
So in the end, it's still sort of like pursuing happiness and wisdom and meaningful in a more long-term sense, that we're not gonna get to really experience happiness now. That's the sad reality we're in. But I just wanna just push it a little further. We're in a time of crisis now, like you said. Do you have for you as a father also, and as a husband, is there a cap for you to when? Is there one thing that you can say, okay, the crisis is over, we can sort of go back to searching for happiness and looking for meanings as our priority instead of survival?
Yeah.
Is there a cap for you? Because I would imagine myself, if we are in the same, just being honest also, if we are in this same situation 10 years from now, if it's still as bad, I'm honestly going to care less now. Because for me, it's reached a point like, if it's raining the whole day, might as well, like, F it, I'll just learn to dance in the rain. I'll just deal with it na lang.
Exactly. That is, in fact, human intelligence and human freedom at work. That despite what the science is telling us, everyone is free to react to the threat as they want to. And that explains the differences in reaction. But I think if somebody is willing to make survival the goal, the priority, still, of course, the entire world is saying once a vaccine is there, obviously things will change and could very well return to the old normal. That could very well be. So it's not going to be forever. It's not going to be for a number of years. We have enough technology and science to at least make us hope that once a vaccine is there and it's been tested and distributed properly, that there will be a return to some kind of normalcy. But if somebody out there among your listeners is willing to make survival the goal for the time being, I recommend two things. One, make the survival of your own self and your loved ones the priority. And if you do it that way, survival will not be the only goal. It's love for the other. So survival itself becomes an instrument only. Something like, I want to keep myself safe and I want to keep my family safe. I want us to survive this COVID-19. Why do you want to do that? But because I love them. So it's still a reordering of things.
Yeah. Okay.
The second level of survival that we can fight for, once, as a family man, I say, once I am assured that I have kept my family and myself safe, that we are practicing all the needed recommendations from the experts, I should also look beyond my family to my community. The next level of survival is to help the community survive. Otherwise, if they don't survive, and like in the movies, right? Hollywood loves to romanticize it. When it's a zombie apocalypse.
Yeah. Oh, I love those.
You think that individual families will just survive. That only happens when it's scripted. In reality,
you need a community.
Even history will tell us that human beings only survived the minute they left family and assembled a tribe, assembled a community.
Which are left family?
Takes care of
when they left their family?
Yeah. Mean to say, when they put aside the priority of the family, once they have protected their family, and then they merge with other families to form what we now call a tribe, and then a nation, that assured long-term survival. And now I've reached a point in the challenge of our times. I'm starting to look at other ways to help the community around me. Now that I'm achieving survival for my family, we're all doing well, thank God. The next goal is something higher than survival. I don't think it will still be happiness. Personally, with a crisis like this, I'm still not willing to shift back to the old pursuit of happiness for myself. Okay. Once greater security is given to us in the form of a vaccine, then I'll start considering returning to some form of my old lifestyle. Enjoying family trips, for example. I don't deny that.
Oh, yeah.
I do those things for happiness, right? Right? Family trips or eating out wherever we wanted to. That's definitely for happiness. But right now, it's really survival. That's the priority.
I understand that survival is a priority, but if not through the ways we used to look for happiness before, there's still that need to connect with other people. There's still that need to do fun things. No matter what the situation, I would say that no matter what the situation is, you should learn to laugh at it. Like, you should always get to be able to laugh at how life is, because there's always although this is the most special and biggest challenge I think the living people have faced now, ever since like the war and whatever, you should still be able to find a way to, it might sound, I don't want it to come off as very selfish, but you should still find your own ways to have fun and to be happy, even if it's very different from the ways we did it before. So I guess just like as a last thing when it comes to this with this talking point, are there things you do specifically to still get that happiness every now and then, even if the bigger goal is still survival?
Yeah, I'd like to use the idea of ordering. Notice with what you just shared with me, you want to have, and definitely I echo that. I myself would like to have fun. I myself would like to have moments of just laughing and enjoying a movie online. Even in the time of the pandemic, I do want so many moments of just being happy with my family. But notice, because of the pandemic, I can have all of that provided that I am not sick with COVID-19. Because the minute I reverse the priority, right? The minute I reverse the priority, and this is what I'm describing about the certain behavior of entire communities elsewhere. I won't mention them. Look at human behavior elsewhere. I'm happy in the Philippines we're kind of
we follow.
The term is hindi tayo pasaway. We follow, right? Provided that you're healthy, then by all means pursue moments with family, pursue enjoyment from work, especially in today's world. We're doing a lot of work from home, but that's provided that you're first biologically, medically safe. Because the minute you reverse it, and in your pursuit of happiness, you acquired the virus, and you've seen the videos on YouTube, it's no joke. One of the first things that the virus will take away from you is the capacity to breathe. And that is so symbolic for me. Of course, the virus never figured it out, right? The virus is not intelligent in that way. But it's so symbolic. The first thing that you take away from the human being is the capacity to breathe. And then life ends.
Yeah.
So yeah, there must still be a reordering. Get the priorities right.
Yeah.
There must still be the reordering.
Yeah. I want to just give emphasis to that reordering and not the destruction of the other things, because
not to
now,
yes.
I'm someone I'm an advocate of fun and happiness, and I know that this pandemic is no joke. I understand why parents and people are so scared of it, but I would like to push also at the same time. Yes, let's prioritize our survival, but let's also prioritize after that. Let's also take care of the other things. Because
definitely
we can't just live in 100% fear every single day. Yes, live with extra caution, but you still have to live. That's my 2 cents.
Absolutely. And I like the word that you use. You said something that I also referred to. The point is not destruction. Let's not contribute to the destruction and the disruption that COVID-19 has already forced us to get into. But the point is ordering, the right ordering of things, which is a discipline seriously promoted in philosophy. Happiness will follow. To return to my marathon runner example, if you want the thrill of crossing the finish line, first you've got to run. And you've got to go through the running, which is never happy. The running itself, is such a hassle. It's even painful for some people, right, to run that long.
Oh yeah.
Distance running, it's so painful. But you've got to go through it first. And I think that's what I mean by the ordering. You first have to prioritize your health, your survival, even economically, financially, and then by all means. Collect your rewards. The first 2 months of the virus, I noticed myself, I was really so obsessed with spraying, with masks, wearing of masks, and strict compliance of no stepping out. And I tell you, you're right. Those were miserable months. The months of April and May were and including June, were miserable months. Months of just being idle and confused and isolated from everyone else.
Yeah.
But because I took care of the health aspect first, which is none other than survival, sometime July, I started just enjoying more moments with my family, even stepping out of the house from time to time. Mm-hmm. The minute I realized that, it's safer.
Humans have sort of we've adjusted na rin. I see it all. Like the times I'm on the road, everyone's wearing a mask and a shield. So I do think it's something that we can work with, although that I also don't really agree that vaccine should be the solution. I still think there are other things that the country can do to better face it. But then, like what you're talking about, marathon. Life is a marathon. Yeah. My dad actually got to run a marathon, and he talked about it that it's really hard. But there's also a high. There's also something you get while running, and that's something I wanna promote a bit. And just while we're going through this pandemic, seems like a marathon in the bigger marathon, in the grander scheme of things in life, but still find a way to have fun every now and then. And sir, I really want to thank you for your time, despite the typhoon and everything. Thank you so much for always educating me. I do wish we can have another session of this, because I still have a lot of questions, still a lot of things I want to talk about. But yeah, from my days as a student to my days now, still confused, still lost, still looking through life and everything. I want to thank you again for your time and for your wisdom as always, sir.
I'm sure you will find. Your way, one way or another. Especially because I know that your art will have something to do with it. I just don't know how, but I trust in the power of art. It has a way, especially with an art form as explosive as dancing, and as energy based. From a former teacher to a former student, and from a philosopher, perhaps unsolicited advice. Listen to your art. It has surprises to give you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your time.
All right.
I wish you and
Take
your
care
family
now.
all the safety.
All the best to your podcast.